Welcome, everyone. We are live now on the inaugural AIER Authors Corner, which is this delightful new series which highlights the amazing work coming out of AIER, which is one of my absolute favorite think tanks. And I'm even more delighted to welcome to the show the first guest for this series, which is the content director of AIER, Jeffrey Tucker. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. So nice to be here. Thanks for hosting this thing. You're going to make it all magical. So I'm excited.
I'm just so excited to have you, Jeffrey, because some of the stuff that you've been putting out in particular, I mean, it's always amazing. You're such an amazing writer. But two articles in particular from the last few days have caught my attention. So I just wanted to start with them. The first article is about iPhones and technology.
Right.
And so let's chat a little bit about that. And sort of what you were talking about in this article. It's this big idea. Like, before I go into that, I just want to mention, like, I mean, I love AIER, and I'm delighted to have this series running in particular to highlight the works of all the authors. So if anyone's wondering, like, what is all this about? What is this new thing that they're trying out? It's a series that highlights the work of the authors at AIER, who are just putting out amazing content. And if you just think about the amount of sheer noise that's on the internet at the moment, and like, you just have to wade through so much muck out there. So AIER really has become my go-to place if I want to, find out, like, if I actually want reliable data, if I actually want reliable information without this like weird slant and agenda that so many places have. Like, AIER just has some remarkable content. So they've kind of become my go-to place. And so Jeffrey in particular, I mean, sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, what you just said is really interesting too. It's very gratifying because that's sort of what I was trying to do. You know, I've worked here for a little longer than a year, but I really had to figure out, like, what is the editorial strategy for an 86-year-old institution that's always had a reputation for stability, integrity, dignity, credibility of the research, and that sort of thing. And so what I really did was I thought, well, right, exactly what you said. There's so much noise out on the internet. So what we really need is to tap the smartest people I know and give them this broad platform to and time and space to research and present their research in a way for regular people, but never talked. It's never condescending, and it's not manipulative. I specifically set out to never have anything as clickbaity, and I knew that this would be a long-term strategy. That it was going to rely fundamentally on building up a network of people that sort of believe in what we're doing, and that we would become a go-to for them. And I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it take place over the last 13 months, that our content's getting stickier. We've got to develop.
It's going tremendously. It's incredible the reach that AIER is starting to have. It as you were saying, like, I mean, it's funny when you're talking about like the clickbaity stuff, and my immediate go-to was just like, what color tie is Jeffrey Tucker wearing today? Find out. You wouldn't believe the reaction, people, that sort of stuff. And that's the stuff that, like, it's funny, a human nature, we just kind of fall into that trap. Like, we see stuff like that, we want to click, we want that information immediately. And that, it's sort of, I don't want to jump the gun, but it leads us into like the first article I wanted to discuss, where you really go into that issue about our obsession these days, and people not wanting to take individual responsibility for this and blaming technology. Like, we've always seen this, right?
I know. Well, this always happens, that people are looking for external factors rather than themselves. Like, something's wrong with my life. Oh, it's because something is happening to me I can't control.
Right.
Well, as a matter of fact, you can control your digital device, but it's a matter of sort of learning how and developing an etiquette and a discipline for making it your servant rather than your master. And I think we're going through that transition right now, and people sort of figuring out, what are the rules for use? How can we encounter our technology in a way? Like, we've got all human knowledge in our pocket. And well, let me just tell you what happened. I'll tell you what gave rise to this article, honestly, just like speaking from a personal point of view. We have a rule in the house, and the house, the manor estate that you've visited yourself, but there's no public cell phone use here. So no problem using your phone, but you have to excuse yourself from the public space. And the reason for that is it's not Puritanism or something like that. It's just a matter of trying to encourage organically contiguous conversation. So you're not constantly interrupted, you know, and you're like looking, oh, I'm sorry, what did you just say?
Yeah.
You know, or losing track. And so you can have full engagement. Then again, this is not puritanical. This is just trying to establish some sort of civilized norms.
Well, it's about also creating, like, I mean, what AIER is also about is about that in-depth exploration of ideas. How can you have an in-depth exploration with anyone if they're constantly like, if they're constantly like, sorry, what was I saying? You know, and it's like, it's so clear, like as soon as the phone enters the equation, you don't even have to have someone who says like, oh, sorry, I missed that, repeat it. The worst thing is that quite often they don't even ask you to repeat it. They just pretend that they heard you, and you know that they missed like the crux of what you're saying. And it just leads to this very superficial conversation.
There's that, and there's even a problem with sort of know-it-allism. Like if you're listening to a piece of music and you say, well, what is that? Oh, well, that's Jean-Baptiste Lully. Well, did he live before or after Bach? And you don't know. So somebody's like, it's like, I just wanted to elicit information from within the space of this room. You know, like, it's not the case that I really wanted a scientific answer to that. I wanted to say, you know, it's like it removes curiosity from the room. And anyway, it's just disturbing. It's really upsetting, especially people forever asking Siri, you know, every question under the sun. You know, it's just like too much.
Siri, what color is Jeffrey's tie? I'm sorry, I don't understand your accent.
White bread or wheat bread. You know, it's just like, can you not do that, please? So, so there is an etiquette element here. But the other thing is that I noticed, and I've adapted to the etiquette just really well, and I'm very happy for it. Actually, it's made me a better person because now when I'm away from the house, I'm developing a kind of personal discipline of like when I'm at dinner, when I'm engaged in conversation with other people, I'm much better about this than I used to be. So this article was really a kind of a personal story for me. But there's even more to it than that. So, for example, a few nights ago, I was sitting there, we were having this nice conversation, and my phone is like buried deep in my pocket, but it's buzzing, you know, and so it's like this weird heartbeat. It's like, zzz, 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 zzz. And you know, you're sitting there, you know, trying to. It's like, well, I wonder who's trying to get my attention. So half of your attention is suddenly on your buzz. So at some point, I thought, you know, I've got a notification problem. And I've just been up to now, too lazy to figure it out. Well, they don't, you know, these phones don't make it easy to control your notifications because every new app is like the default is that they're going to be waking you up just constantly, like with BuzzFeed's latest news about Cohen or something, you know, some nonsense, and none of it's important. So I tried to figure out my notifications. Like, well, it turned out that, you know, 4 out of 5 of my notifications were from a thing that I didn't really need at all. It was a notification about other people editing Google Documents or something like that. So I had to do a research to figure out how to turn it off without disabling it. Anyway, the point is, I did it, and most of all my notifications just completely went away. Well, that was a huge upgrade in my life, and so that's why I wrote the article. I thought, well, you know, through adoption of a little bit of a different standards of etiquette, being deferential to the fact that other people are talking, I should actually listen to them. And then curating my own device with just a little bit of effort, I improved my life, you know, 95%, just like that. And, you know, I think this is the way we need to go about it. We need to take personal responsibility rather than writing an article for the New York Times complaining about how Zuckerberg's taking over my life and I hate him for it.
Yeah, and now I'm going to sue him for all the years I've wasted. It's like, you know what? There was no one forcing you to use Facebook, but you just opted into that. Like,
yeah, so I called my article like, "Don't blame technology, blame yourself." You know, and look, there is nothing wrong with the transition period. I think when people get new technologies, people just go a little bit crazy, you know, and they overuse them. They allow them to displace other aspects of their lives, and then eventually things settle down. And they incorporate it into our lives. I remember when cell phones first came out, it was a big deal to not have to stand, you know, in the hallway at your house with a phone connected to it, blah blah blah. Now you can actually just walk around and pick out your phone and talk. And people are doing this in restaurants. You know, you go to a local restaurant, there's a guy, yeah, I know what you mean, Joe.
Put in your cell order.
Right. It was annoying. But now people don't do that anymore. So people have gotten a lot better about it. And I don't think it's accidental that young people are actually much better at using this technology. By better, I mean incorporated into a normal part of their lives than old people who are still just enraptured, with the fact that they can, they're getting all these constant notifications.
Mm-hmm.
The other strange thing is that I think what people have a tendency to do is plug in technological notifications in place of a kind of to fill a vacuum in our own lives.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, it triggers all the right parts of our brain, right? It gives us the approval that we want, that we seek from our peers. It gives us constant attention. We're constantly being stimulated, but in this very superficial way that at the end of the day isn't fulfilling and isn't helping us with like long-term happiness.
Right. And my standard is like, if there's a book that comes out that you just think, well, I'd like to read that, but you think, well, the truth is I won't read it because I can't ever pay attention to anything for longer than 90 seconds. Because I have to,
It hurts me because it's so true. It's like, I've started doing morning pages in the morning, Jeffrey, to like calm me and center me and saying, what's my, role for the day? Like, what's my purpose? What are 3 things I need to get done? And I have to be so disciplined now because I was opening up my morning pages and going, great. Oh, that reminds me, such and such has got it. And then I'd write a quick email and then I'd be like, okay, back to my morning pages. I'd write a sentence like, today I really want to, what I want to do? I want to see if Taylor Swift ended up putting out that new Elle magazine cover. Oh, yeah, there are the photos. Oh, that's so great. And it's incredible. Like what's
and the problem is that you wake up one day and you're like, wait, I haven't read a book in a year. I haven't thought seriously about a topic. I've not had any really big new thoughts in 2 years. I mean, you have to consider what are the costs, and whether or not you really intended for BuzzFeed notifications to squeeze out everything else in life to you.
There's huge opportunity costs there, Jeffrey, that people don't realize. If they're saying yes to these notifications, they're saying no to something else, and they just don't realize what they're saying no to.
And so this is the other argument I made. It's like, I don't fault the app makers or the phone designers or anybody else or any of the businesses that are making money off our attention. They're doing their job. But there's also, you have to push back on that. And I recalled when I was 7 years old, when you first at the dawn of your material consciousness, that I would, in the United States, at least when I was young, we had cartoons on Saturday morning. So I would watch the cartoons. And so the advertisements, I loved them because it was like, don't you want to sit in this, sit and spin? You can sit and spin. And here's your moon boots. And probably you need this big wheel that you can drive around while eating your sugar snack cereal. And, I was just like enraptured with all these things. And so I would go and ask my parents, can you please buy me honeycomb? Because I want to eat it in a hideout, and so on. And they indulged me slightly, on cereal preferences, which parents these days never did. But and then at Christmas they would buy me the moon boots and the big wheel and the scarecrow shotgun thing or whatever. And then I learned that these things weren't all they were cracked up to be. So by the time I was 10, I kind of dialed that back and I fixed myself. So to me, that's the way human life evolves. By making mistakes, observing your mistakes and correcting them going forward. And this is, I think, more of a Hayekian way of understanding our relationship to the material world around us, to acknowledge the presence of learning. And what I say this because economists have been involved in this debate for a very long time, which is, are people rational all the time, or do they need constant nudges to stop them from doing something terrible? For example, when you go into IKEA, they are making cinnamon rolls. And so the economists who said that we need constant nudges from the government say, it's really quite wicked. You go into IKEA and you smell these cinnamon rolls, and so you just can't help yourself. You go and you eat one. Well, that's bad for you. And you know it, so you shouldn't do it. So we need social pressures to prevent you from doing that, and even government regulations to stop that. Well, so my point is that this is nonsense. What actually happens is that you go into IKEA, you smell a cinnamon bun, you eat it, and then you have a sense of regret, like, I shouldn't have done that. So the next time you go in, you start to correct yourself. And we have to develop, I think, as a society, a sort of tolerance for this learning process, which means that we have to live in the presence of things that are maybe irrational, maybe a little bit rude, you know, maybe not quite right, but trust that in the evolved system of social norms, that we are going to find new and better ways of doing things. And I think that's what's happening with technology right now. We're going through this transition phase of we're sort of after that stage of, oh my God, wow, to now, like, can we just like incorporate this into our lives in a way that helps me live the best life I possibly can without displacing everything that I never really intended to get rid of. For example, reading books.
Absolutely, but there's a large issue I think that you really started to get at in your article that I thought was really important, and it's this idea of the blame on technology, which is something that we've started doing as a society, and we've started. It's like almost like the Luddites of the world who are saying like, oh well, the new tech is bad because it's doing this. The new tech is bad because it's changing us like this, and all of this way, like as you said, it's just a way of deflecting responsibility and putting it on something else so that we can claim that we're victims and at the behest of whatever device we're using, when really we need to be cultivating as a society a sense of individual responsibility and not be blaming the new technology, because there's always been new tech, right? You see those memes from the early days where you have people in the subway and they're all reading the paper, and then you put it next to a photo of everyone on the subway reading their iPhones, and people are like, not much has changed. So that should be a key that tells you, yes, not much has changed. Human nature is still the same. We need to be, cultivating ourselves. We need to be improving ourselves, not saying like, well, this is a new technology, we should put limitations on it, we should put age restrictions on it, we should do all these things. How about we just tell people this is your responsibility and you need to learn to be the best person that you can, despite everything constantly changing, because the world is always going to change.
There's nothing wrong with saying, that ad you just saw on Facebook is manipulating you. I mean, it's trying to get you to do something that you may not in fact want to do. What is wrong with that? But instead, we're still living in a time where everybody's continuing to blame the Russians for the fact that Trump was elected. I mean, it's just perfectly ridiculous, and so patronizing this attitude. But in any case, my point of my article is that really we all need to just take responsibility for our technology, and we do have the tools available to control it, but it's going to take a volitional act on our part to decide how do we want to incorporate this technology into our lives. And for me, it's been a matter of kind of just learning to dial it back enough so that the technology is very useful, but not intrusive and invasive to the kind of life I really want to live. And
here's a question from the audience, Jeffrey. So I understand all of that. We're talking about shaping the individual and shaping your life choices and making sure that you're in control. You're not letting tech control you, and that you are actively making choices that put you in a better position and are better for your life. But sometimes those things may be out of our control, right? What do you do in a situation if you're a young entrepreneur, you're part of some kind of tech startup, or you're a worker that requires you to be constantly available? Because this is a new phenomenon. Before, I remember getting phone calls. If anyone called our house probably after 7 p.m. at night, my dad would get so angry. He would not answer the phone, or he would shout at them. And these days, I'll get text messages from people at 11. If they don't want to receive my text messages, I'll send text messages at 11 too. And if they don't want to receive them, I just trust that they'll put their phone on silent. So like, what do we do in this world where sometimes like we are expected to be available at all times?
Well, so what I actually think about that, Naomi? I think that we believe that we're expected to do that, but we're not really. Like, it kind of flatters us. Like, oh, my boss just can't live without me,
So is it a bit of a crutch, you're saying, that people build up this? It's like the busyness, that people have, where they're constantly addicted to being busy, but are they actually doing work that's substantial, or is it just busy work? Are there things you have to do?
I'm not, and giving all this advice, I'm not saying I know how to do this, because I'm speaking from personal experience. I used to love this idea that I was never off work, that it was just oh my God, you know, I'm waking up 3 times a night to check on the server and look at our traffic and answer Slack messages and all that.
I remember that, Jeffrey, actually. I remember in 2014 at Toronto Bitcoin convention, I think it was, and everyone's going like, this is like cutting edge technology and Ethereum hasn't been launched yet, but Vitalik Buterin's there giving his like first public presentation of this tech, and everything's going, and you're like, you know, the superstar of this event, everyone's like, oh, cool, you know, it's great having you. And then you just disappear. And I find out it's because you've gone back to your room to like write an article, and then you're there at this function, and then you're writing another article that inspired you. Like, you do have this business mentality.
Yeah, it's fine. And if that's the way you choose to live, that's fine. But don't pretend as if it's somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is that there's really no message you get that can't, for the overwhelming majority of cases, wait until tomorrow. And just because somebody can email you at midnight doesn't mean that they need an answer at 12:02. I mean, it's just not. I just think we tell ourselves these stories, and that's fine. We all want to be useful, and that's very nice. But don't act like the victim. Like, oh, it's just so pathetic, you know, that I'm just like never offline. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You know, I can never get a break. I think that's just all self-flattery, really. I mean,
I completely agree, actually.
Yeah. There's no boss that, you know, unless you've got a serious job where it's, you know, your brain surgery, you know, and your patient's dying. Okay, you know, that's different, but that's not the case for the overwhelming number of people who are always preening about, you know, how oppressed they are because they're never allowed to get offline. It's just, it's really not true.
And let's also talk. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and even if somebody is like, I texted Naomi 5 minutes ago, she's not answering me. You know, sometimes we have to train our colleagues too, you know.
And you've trained me before. You have. I've been like, Jeffrey, here's the thing I need to know. Jeffrey, are you there? Jeffrey, I like called you and you'd be like, Naomi, if I didn't answer the phone the first time, do not keep ringing me. Like, I mean, it's good, you know. You can remind people gently about that, and I think that's
we're going to get there. We're going to get there as a civilization. We really are, and I think really it comes down to the court of taste and manners more than anything else. And new technology doesn't come with rules for how you use it. Those are things that have to socially evolve. And I think we're in that process of evolving these new rules, and then there'll be another new technology that will disrupt us, and we'll have to invent new rules. But let us not think for a moment that we can do without this court of taste and manners. This is what makes life civil, and it's what makes a technology integrated into our existing structures of civilization. We cannot do without it.
Absolutely. And I want to bring it back again to another thing that you brought up in the article, which I thought was really important. You were talking about how we literally do walk around with the world's knowledge at our fingertips. You know, that's what's inside this phone. If you're connected to the internet, you have every bit of information that you could possibly want. You know, there's so much potential right here, and there's so much, you know, data out there that is like, and analytics that are just like figuring out, you know, how can we make our lives the best that they could be. You know, there are all these apps that you can download now, all this. So like when we start to talk about technology as the problem, we're really missing the point that things are so wonderful right now, and there's so much great stuff at our disposal. Like, instead of getting notifications every time someone liked a Twitter post or something, how about you actually search and use the technology at your disposal to make your life better? Like, that's something that I've done recently. I discovered there was an app that was rated the best app of 2018. It was called Fabulous, and it was about training good habits. And I thought, okay, this is something that has been recommended across the board. People are saying it's making their life better. How about I use the tech for the better? We have it at our fingertips. We have this potential for tremendous life-changing good. So let's not blame tech as if tech is a bad thing. Let's just harness this power and use it to make our lives the best lives that they can be.
You know, I'm fascinated by this whole issue of why we think of ourselves why we think of technology as so external to us. Whereas the fact is, technology used to be called in the 19th century the practical arts, and it consists of entrepreneurs trying to find ways to entice us into living a better life by using their commercial product, and that's great. One of the things that but I think that things have gotten so complicated that we feel in a sense alienated from our technology, as if it's like invading our lives rather than really our servant. But I think it's an illusion. One of the things that I've started to really be interested in the strangest way, are mechanical clocks. And I have to tell you, I'm absolutely fascinated by them, and I've been buying them like crazy and trying to learn how to fix them and control them and stuff like that, and being able to identify from the sound of the tick, the approximate year in which it was made and so on. But I can't get over this. You're going to think this is ridiculous, but I just can't get over the fact that you don't have to plug it in. I mean, it's like, what? How does something work without a wire? So one of the things we're looking at getting around here, around the house, this will make you laugh, is a Victrola, which you crank up and it runs on a string just like a clock, and then you put the needle on the record and out comes the music from a horn. And again, you don't have to plug it in.
Like a gramophone?
Yeah, like an old-fashioned Victrola. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. That's so cool.
I know. Yeah, we're shopping for them right now, but I can't wait to get it. Turn it on and put it. It's going to be so fun. But I like getting in touch with these older technologies, because they help us at least intellectually understand that that these are human-made things. That these are not monsters invading our lives. These are things that human beings have made to serve us better. And I love these old technologies because they speak a little bit more to the prescience of that reality.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's such an important issue, especially when you do. I mean, I hate to say it, but there is a bit of a victim mentality at the moment that is being thrown around, where people, bad things happen to all of us. And whether that's just like, lesser bad things, like, oh, I feel like my life's getting away from me because my social media is constantly pinging me and all of this, I need to find peace and calm, and people lose the fact that they can create that peace and calm in their own lives. They can control these external influences, and they can control their reactions to them. That's the most important lesson I think that we can get from technology, because it can be applied to everything in our lives. We can always control our reaction to everything. When it comes to social media, if you're getting pings, if you're getting emails, you can control your reaction to that. You can control, as you said, to reply at 10 o'clock at night, or you can decide to wait until the next morning, and that's up to you.
Sure, and so much of what we think is out of our control actually was within our control. I had the funniest thing happen to me, because I've really gotten interested in alabaster lamps, and because they're so beautiful. They're just, do you know, have you ever seen them? I mean, they're so beautiful. Anyway, so I Googled alabaster lamps, and I'm shopping. Now, every ad I get from any website I go to, or even newspapers I read, like the Wall Street Journal comes up and it's like an alabaster lamp at the top. So I'm overwhelmed with advertisements for alabaster lamps because it's a cheap ad buy and not many people are Googling it, but this is the reason that I'm getting this is because of the interest that I showed in it. I mean, people are genuinely trying to sell me alabaster lamps, and there's nothing particularly invasive about that. I mean, I feel like, how dare you know about my interest in alabaster lamps? Well, if I didn't want anybody to know about it, I shouldn't have Googled it. I mean, this is just it's not some alien Martian lizard person trying to sell me an alabaster lamp. I'm trying to buy one, and so this is things are a lot less scary once you take it apart and look at it that way.
Absolutely. So I do want to go on, Jeffrey, to talk about another article which you put out a few days ago that I thought was great. And what caught my eye was the way that you introduced this article, which just made me giggle. Right? It is.
You're welcome to read it.
I'm going to read it verbatim.
Your pretty Perth accent.
Yeah, so you said in this Facebook post, you said, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was trying to explain to me that the world is going to melt, we are all going to die, and probably we shouldn't be having any more children. But I was distracted by the dinner she was preparing on camera. She was carefully cutting sweet potatoes before putting them in the oven. Where did OAC get her sweet potatoes? I just thought that was such a beautiful introduction to an article. It just caught my attention, you know. So let's talk a little bit about what this article was about. Obviously, anyone who has followed Alexandria knows that she's not the most economically literate person in the world, and she says some strange things, and there seems to be a lot of contradiction, which is what the article mainly focuses on, the contradiction between what she says and her actions. Now, you honed in on something rudimentary, everyday, that she was doing just while she was, you know, in this vlog, telling people, you know, how they should be living, etc., the best things for the world, all of this stuff. So what she was doing was she was preparing a meal. Now, this shouldn't, you know, really pique anyone's interest. This is just something she was doing to show probably she was an everyday person. She's there preparing her meal. It was probably very strategic on the part of her management and people who handle her publicity. But you honed into the fact that we should not be taking this rudimentary meal making for granted at all. And it sort of brings you back to the idea of like, you know, iPencil, right? The idea of, what is it? IM-Pencil? No, what's the...
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that we take these things for granted, and there were three things that like stood out to me from the video. One was the way she just casually used salt and put it on there, and it's just like in Roman times, salt was money; it was so rare, and because it was the most desired, most scarce good, and so it was like it worked as money. Now salt's so prevalent, you know, we just throw it around as if it's nothing. But if you've ever tried to go a couple of weeks without salt, or even a day without salt in your food, you realize just how weirdly important it is to our lives. And the thing that brought it to us was, of course, the advance of the division of labor, trade and exchange, entrepreneurship, and technology, which is to say capitalism, you know, which she despises. And then I got annoyed that she was using this beautiful steel knife. Well, you know, steel wasn't even commercially viable until really the 1880s. I mean, and it took metallurgists like really, people were working on trying to create steel in a reliable way for up to 100 years before it actually became genuinely viable. Now it's just everywhere, and we don't think anything of it. I mean, before there was steel, we couldn't even build skyscrapers because iron was too heavy, and we couldn't even traverse large bodies of water because the iron would literally sink into the rivers, you know. So steel is why we can drive across large bodies of water. It's why that's why cities got really tall, you know, after the 1870s and 1880s, because now we had the substance to actually build these things. So, and I don't know if what floor she's living on in her building, but it just wouldn't be possible for vast numbers of buildings in most major cities to exist without the commercial viability of steel, which was entirely a capitalistic product again. And then on the question of sweet potatoes themselves, I was just fascinated to read up on the history of them. For sure, they're not grown in Washington, D.C. So she didn't pick them from her garden, for sure.
Swamp potatoes.
Yeah, and so she bought them at the store, but the store got them through trucks and through planes, and 67% of the world's sweet potatoes are provided by China now. Probably hers most likely came from South Carolina, but you can't say for sure. But regardless of transportation technology that she herself is against, you know, she's against internal combustion. She wants to abolish, you know, airline travel, which is just the silliest thing, and trucking in particular. So, I mean, there's no chance that she would have that salt, that steel knife, or those sweet potatoes if her preferred system went forward. So, you know, I referred to it as a performative contradiction, too acute not to note, at least in passing. So it's frustrating to me. But, you know, there's something I didn't mention in my article, which is this outrageous comment she makes towards the end, where she says, you know, probably we should even think about not having kids. Now, so just that remark alone is fascinating, because the fact that she thinks of having kids is the equivalent of going out and buying a dress, or whether she should buy a new pair of shoes or not, that is the ultimate luxury. I mean, 2 centuries ago, 1 out of 2 in the developed world, 1 out of 2 children died before the age of 5. You had to have a lot of kids to have any children, because death was everywhere. And now, of course, you know, infant mortality and child mortality has just fallen down to like 40. It's fallen from like 50% 200 years ago to down to 4%. And these are global averages. So now we can treat having children as something like, I may do that, or I might not do that. I don't really know. We'll see other than that. Well, to what do we owe that? extraordinary luxury, the fact we're not living constantly in the presence of death all around us, you know, that again is an illustration of the advantages of the very economic progress she decries as being so destructive. So she gets just the complete absence of awareness of the world that's around her. And it's true that it's a tragedy of human life in the sense that we can't live in all times. We can only live in the times where we are. But that tempts us to take for granted everything that's around us. Oh, also the fact that she was like, it's in the middle of winter. She's in Washington, D.C., and she's toasty warm in her apartment. Well, you know, there are people alive today, Naomi, who will tell you that the greatest single invention of their lives was not air travel and the internet. It was indoor heating. Mm-hmm. Because 100 years ago, you had to work 2 days to heat your house for 1 day.
Yeah.
Growing the wood, chopping it down, feeding the fireplace, cleaning it out. The whole family members, this is their and 100% of their job to do this stuff. Now she casually walks over and pushes a button on the wall. And oh, now here's my luxurious warm house. Let's abolish capitalism.
Yeah.
It's just too much. It's just too much.
So yeah, I mean, you have to look at we look at basically the argument with heating it, it's sort of like a pet argument of mine, that like a pet hate when I hear people talking about that, because you think about how people used to keep their houses warm, and they'd have a fire in the middle of their hut, and then the smoke would just be all throughout the hut, and they'd be inhaling it, and then people were dying by the age of 30 because they just had black lungs filled with all of this smoke, you know. And then the progress that we've made, like, so that people can actually have a quality of life, and so that, you know, Alexandria can be in her apartment toasty warm and without a single cough in that whole video, you know, that's remarkable that we've been able to create that. And one thing, sorry, go on.
Everybody should be free to try out the Green New Deal anytime. Don't pay your electricity bill for a month. Have it be shut off. See what you think.
Yeah, I think that's a great experiment that people should volitionally choose if they care about this stuff. It's, you know, it brings us to the larger point that you brought up in your article as well, because there is this it seems that there is this constant battle, and it's a battle between humans and the environment. And I know a lot of people, and it's becoming a more and more pervasive point of view, to say, well, I don't like humanity. Humanity is the enemy. Maybe humans should all die out. Maybe we should all stop having children and just, you know, disappear because we're hurting the environment. We're killing animals. Animals are going extinct. The polar ice caps are melting. You know, so how do you deal with something like that when people have such a hatred for humanity? I mean, they don't look at their fellow man and feel compassion or empathy or admiration for things that people have built. They just feel vitriol and hatred. And they would rather see a world where humans didn't exist and see everything, you know, just natural. How do you respond to something like that?
Well, I think what you have here is people that have grown intellectually habituated to the presence of a Hegelian dialectic. So they think that nothing good can happen without something secretly bad happening all the time. And it's not just in economic development versus the environment. It's men versus women. It's races. It's Islam versus Christianity. People are becoming intellectually habituated to this, to the belief that all of life consists in these irreconcilable conflicts, and they can't imagine cooperative solutions. And I think politics itself trains us to believe this. And so we see things that really aren't true. You know, like, for example, the war between the sexes, ridiculous. I mean, men and women need each other, obviously, to have a cooperative relationship to further life on Earth. But somehow you would never know that by reading the media. You'd think that any advance of a man comes at the expense of a woman and vice versa. And I think it's the same thing with man versus nature. The reality is the advanced capitalist societies are the cleanest societies there are. You know, and we only have to just open up our eyes and see that humankind has the capacity to create cooperative relationships that give us ever more wealth, plus peace, plus cooperation, you know, plus ever more human fraternity and so on. But because we've stopped believing in laissez-faire liberalism, we've stopped believing in the capacity of human beings to solve problems. And I think that's really what it comes down to. In other words, I think environmentalism, as it's rendered by the extreme forms like AOC, really is yet another application of Marxian conflict doctrine to yet another area of life. And it's really an extension not of the reality around us, but of the ideology we carry around our heads.
I think also something that you touched on earlier, this idea of taking things for granted. You know, she's cozy warm in her apartment. She's not really thinking about it. There is this idea that I think is getting more and more common that, you know, when you look at, like, currently I'm looking at my desktop and there's this gorgeous mountain and hillside and a lake and all of the trees are in this beautiful autumn colors. And I look at that and I go, wow, nature is beautiful. That is just picturesque, stunning, take my breath away. And, you know, I'll go hiking and I'll look out and I'll just take a deep breath and I'll just think, oh my gosh, this nature is beautiful. And, you know, I'll go it'll be summertime and I'll go to the beach and I'll see the beautiful ocean and the waves and the sand and I'll look at it. And it's this sublime nature, you know, that we now see purely as beauty and romance and just this idyllic nature. And I think that only comes from the fact that we are so comfortable today that we don't look at nature, you know, with apprehension anymore. We don't look at nature being scared or being, you know, thinking, oh my gosh, this is brutal. If you actually think what nature is, and if we were to be in the elements, like if I were not in this enclosed room right now, I would be outside and it would be, you know, -0 degrees and I'd probably get chilblains immediately. Maybe my fingers would fall off if I stay there too long. I guess freezing out there. It's completely inhospitable. Nature is harsh. And I think we forget that from the coziness of sitting behind our computers or sitting in front of our webcams doing vlogs for the internet while cutting our sweet potatoes. We forget, and we kind of have this idealized, you know, conception of nature as only being this good thing that we have to preserve, and humans are bad because we're interfering with this. But nature, as you said, we can have this cooperative relationship. Humans have the ability to live and create clean environments, and we're getting better and better as we go along and develop new technologies. We could tame this environment and live in this beautiful world at the same time. And people think that it has to be either or.
Yeah, that's really true. We love nature, but we especially love it when it's tamed by human hands. You know? If it's not,
no one likes to mention that, Jeffrey.
Yeah, we won't like it very long if it's not. That's really true. Yeah, that's really true. I mean, I'm in Western Massachusetts right now, and it was 30 below a couple of weeks ago, and you know, your body can't actually feel that temperature. It's not possible for us to feel it, but your body nonetheless experiences it. So if you're out there longer than 10 minutes, very likely risking frostbite. I'm constantly marvel at the fact that anybody could have lived in the deep south before air conditioning or anywhere in the Northeast before indoor heating. I just can't even believe it.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think a call to action would be if you are to come in contact with people who start to repeat this rhetoric? Because it is very seductive. You know, you want to be part of the team that's fixing things and, you know, and making the hard calls, and, you know, the masses who are saying, well, let's sacrifice these things and do this for the greater good. What do you say to them? Like, how do you convince them, like, there actually doesn't need to be a sacrifice? There can be cooperation, and this is the best step forward, not what you're saying.
I never try to convince people of the big theory. I just like to tell charming stories. So on the sweet potato in particular, it's a fascinating thing that it languished in obscurity for 5,000 years in various Polynesian islands until it made its way over on boats over to Latin America, and then finally taken from Peru back to Europe by, of all people, Christopher Columbus, and then it eventually comes over here. So in some ways, it could be considered the ultimate colonial vegetable to be eschewed by any responsible social justice warrior, you know. But that's the reason we have all these foods around us. I mean, tomatoes came from Italy. If it weren't for international trade, we never would have had them on our table. I mean, we really don't want to live in a world where we could only we'd have to become hunters and gatherers, you know. And the only way we're not going to be that is if we develop sophisticated technologies and cooperative relationships and the division of labor. So the people are helping people live better lives. And you can call that system whatever you want. I'm happy to call it capitalism. You can call it a market society or just a society of social cooperation. But regardless, the Green New Deal is not going to get us there.
Exactly, and I have Art Carden in the comments who are talking about the ability for people to conceptualize what life would be like without their modern luxuries. And he says it's easier to imagine life in the north without indoor heating than life in the south without AC, because there is no cooling analog to fire, which is a great point there. You know, we really do take a lot for granted these days, and there's a lot of volunteering on others' behalf to get rid of these luxuries. You know, people like Alexandria and her warmer partner cutting her sweet potatoes with a steel knife, saying we should get rid of all of these luxuries. Like, as you said, I would love to see these people volunteering on their own behalf. Maybe they can just cut those things out of their life. Maybe they can go and get a tent. It can't be a plastic tent because that was created, you know, with bad things happening. Obviously, they talk about plastic being very bad. So, you know, why don't they go and live in the wilderness without any of these modern conveniences?
Well, it's a decent thing to do, and a wonderful learning experience. I don't know if you ever read Henry David Thoreau's book Walden. This is precisely what he set out to do, and it's a fascinating account. I mean, he worked in a pencil factory, then he went for a year and lived in Walden, and really did sort of discover things about himself and about nature. Lived a very difficult life, but you know what? He left.
Yeah.
He wrote a book and then he left. And
even the people, so I know a lot of people who love through hiking, who love long distance hiking, and they literally go out for 6 months with just what's on their back and walk for forever. But you know what I know? I know that they love their trips into town where they get a shower. And I know that they love the cooker that they're carrying on their back with them that was also created from these steel mills and whatnot. And they love their tents. They're not going to go out there without their tent and their wonderful, you know, thermo sleeping bag that's protecting them against the elements. Like, even the people who are out there for 6 months with like none of the modern conveniences that we have, even they come in from the wild, and even they use these modern conveniences to make things more habitable. So there is this level of cognitive dissonance that's going on for sure. And I love that idea that you mentioned, Jeffrey. I love the idea of this cooperation. And I think we need to focus more on that. This idea that we can live in this wonderful, healthy, peaceful world with modern conveniences, and we don't have to be martyrs and say we need to get rid of them all. Let's find that cooperative point. Let's encourage the free market to come up with solutions ever more. You know, I know a lot of people who would choose the more environmentally friendly option than a less environmentally friendly option, and that's thanks to the free market and the ability for people to be experimenting and constantly innovating and getting better technology.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I think often about Adam Smith, who set out, you know, to write The Wealth of Nations, to discover this great mystery of where wealth comes from. Because, you know, since the ancient world, people didn't believe there was such a thing as making new wealth. But by the 18th century, it became very obvious that new wealth was being made, and he set out to really solve this problem. Where is this stuff coming from? It's not obvious at all, and his answer is strange. And even slightly boring. What he said was that it comes from the division of labor, which is a complicated way of saying it comes from people's increasing capacity to depend on each other and to specialize and to find ever greater ways to cooperate together. That's all that was his answer. If we do that, then we make wealth. I
think that's beautiful. So we ran out of time now. Lucas Bessie had a question, but maybe we could discuss it in our next video. He says, Dr. Tucker, do you think the economic argument is more persuasive than the moral argument for a stateless society? Would love to hear your thoughts. So talking about, you know, a stateless society, this is something that I've been reading more and more about recently. I mean, obviously I'm an anarchist myself, but it's just like reading different theories of how to get from here to there, and the different arguments for and against. I always find fascinating, and I'm always learning something. So maybe this is something we could go into in a whole interview in the future.
So about our new series. We have so many amazing authors, from the brilliant Phil Magnus and the disciplined and erudite Max Gulker, and the hotly hot genius of Pete Earle, and so on, and Will Luther. And I'm just thinking Art Carden, who's, we've got so many wonderful writers for AIER, and I think you're the perfect person to elicit from them their best thoughts.
Well, I just am so in love with all of their thoughts that it's hard not to share that passion. There's so much knowledge out there, and if we can help share that knowledge with people through this series, introduce them to new ideas and some of the wonderful work that's coming out of AIER, then I'm going to be thrilled about that. So very excited about this series also, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you so much for being here. Thanks to everyone in the chat who's been watching. Make sure that you do go to AIER.org and have all these articles coming out every single day that are discussing all kinds of issues. So check that out, and make sure you keep an eye on the YouTube channel for all of the scheduled live streams that we're going to be doing for this new series that we're putting out. So thank you so much, and thank you, Jeffrey.